Kia ora, my name is Arlette, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make the flower bucket hat that I have designed with these fun petals going all the way around the rim. Crazy that I've never seen this in a store before. I feel like this hat should already exist, but it doesn't, so I'm going to teach you how to do it. If you are just getting into sewing and you're looking for a project that you can do in one day that's not going to use heaps of fabric and that's not going to cause you to have a mental breakdown because you get confused, I feel like this is a pretty fun place to start. It's definitely a unique piece that you can be proud that you've made. The pattern for this hat is linked below. I sell it on my website for just $3. If you could go buy one, that would really help me out. Girls gotta eat. But if you're a smart cookie, you can probably figure out how to cut your own pattern for this hat just based on this video tutorial and maybe a pre-existing bucket hat, and I'm not gonna hate you for that. So first things first, what sort of materials are we going to need? Now you're gonna need less than ½ meter of your main fabric, your lining fabric, and of the interfacing that you are gonna use. The hat that I'm going to make in this tutorial, I'm going to make one from this wonderful mustard cord fabric that has a little bit of a sort of buttercup feeling. The stiffer the fabric that you choose, the stiffer that your petals are going to be. You can use a floppy fabric. We're going to put 2 layers of interfacing into the rim of this bucket hat, so it's going to give it a little bit of structure, but interfacing is only going to get you so far. You might end up with a hat that looks like this if you try and use something too floppy. If you want to be able to bend it back and play around with it and have fun, then I would recommend maybe a denim, a corduroy, a stiff linen like this one is made out of. The stiffer the fabric, the stiffer your petals, right? Now for the lining of the hat, I'm going to recommend that you use a cotton because you want it to feel nice and breathable against your head. If you use something that has lots of polyester in it, wearing this in summer is not going to be that fun. I am just using a classic untreated cotton. If you are looking to use thrifted materials, things that you already have in your stash or in your home, then using an old pillowcase is actually a really good option for the lining of this hat because it's cotton, it's worn, you've already got it in your house. The most sustainable thing that we can do is make clothes from stuff that we already have and not have to go out and buy new things, right? You could even use thrifted fabrics to make the hat yourself. I reckon if you had an old pair of denim jeans or a denim jacket, that'd make a really cool hat too. Your pattern, your fabric, interfacing, and your lining fabric, some pins, some thread, some scissors or a rotary blade if you prefer to use one of those, and I'm really going to recommend you use an iron as well. First things first, we want to lay our pattern onto our fabric. You will notice that this circular piece actually fits inside the brim, so you can just cut that hole out and then use one of those as your pattern piece. Now, if you are familiar with commercial patterns, you'll know that you usually need to leave a 1/4 inch seam allowance around the edge of your pattern piece. With this pattern, the edge is actually where we want to cut. So you'll see there's this faint gray line on the inside of the pattern, and that's your seam. Okay, so we're laying our pattern pieces out, and you want to keep an eye on this tab on the edge of your petals. You need to cut around that because that marker point is going to help you to line your petal pieces up when it comes time to sew them together. If you're using a fabric with a pattern on it, consider where you want the pattern to lie with how you position your pattern pieces onto the fabric before you cut them. So we're just going to pin those in place and then cut our pieces. And you can see here I'm using a rotary blade because I find it easier when it comes to cutting circles. So we've cut our circle out of the center and we're going to take one of them and throw them away. The other one we're going to keep, and that's going to be the top of our hat. Now onto the lining fabric and onto our interfacing. Now when it comes to cutting the sweatband, you'll see that there's going to be an arrow on the pattern indicating that you need to cut on the bias grain. This means that you need to cut on a diagonal. It's going to give you some good stretch there. Now if you're using an iron-on interfacing, this is the point where you want to iron that onto your main fabric pieces. Now we want to start by taking the 2 sideband pieces from our inner lining and pinning them along each edge. And then we want to sew those 2 edges together and press them down. Next up we take the cap of our lining and we're going to pin the side bands onto that around the edges, making sure that we have all of our seams facing outward. If you prefer to use clips instead of pins, you can use those here. And you'll see it should look something like this. Now we sew that together using a straight stitch And there we go, that's the inside of our hat, the lining. Now we're going to repeat that process but with our main fabric and our interfacing. So pin those two sides together. I'm actually going to leave one edge of this undone just so that if we don't get our seam allowances perfectly equal, we've got a little bit of wiggle room to maybe fix mistakes later on. If you are a beginning sewer, I really recommend you do that. And we pin the top of the cap on, sew it together again. But remember, we've just left that last edge of the side loose, and there we go. That's what that should look like. We can flip it inside out and you'll see that's going to be the outside crown of our hat. With the right sides of the fabric facing together and the interfacing sides facing out, we're going to line those two tabs up and then pin our petals together. I've done it really loosely, but the more pins you use, the more secure it's going to be. Now we're going to stitch all the way around the edge of our petals, and as we get to the corners between two petals, we're going to manually put our needle down into the fabric, lift up the foot, and just rotate our hat brim underneath so that it lines up again, and stitch that next petal. There we go. And at this point you might start to get really dizzy because it is a lot of circles. All right, now that we've done that, that little tab that we use to line everything up, we can go ahead and chop that right off. Now the next step is to go all the way around the brim edge of the hat and just snip little incisions all the way along like this. Yes, we have to go all the way around the hat. Now, if you are new to sewing, I know what you're thinking. You're looking at this thinking, why is she doing that? That seems boring. I'm going to skip that. Well, if you skip this step, your petals are going to look janky as. So trust me, I know this is boring, but you have to do it. It's going to help the curved edges of these petals to really sit nice and flat once we've inverted the fabric. And now that we've finished that, we can invert our fabric so that we have the right sides facing out and our seams hidden on the insides there. And you're going to want to push around the edges of all of those petals and just make sure that your fabric is nice and pushed out all the way around. If you have any corners that are looking a little bit funny and puffy like this, just flip the fabric back around and make sure that you've snipped into the corner enough, giving that fabric enough space to bend. We're going to press that nice and flat, and we're going to top stitch all the way around the edge of the brim of the hat. If you are new to sewing, you can top stitch a nice centimetre in, but if you're a bit more confident, you can top stitch right on the edge and get a really neat finish. Okay, so now that we've finished our brim and we've finished our hat with our lining, we can get ready to start assembling everything. And remember, we've left that one side of the top of our hat loose, so we're going to need to sew that together soon. Now, we're going to pin the crown of our hat into the brim and just think about how you want the petals to sit on your head as you wear this hat and sort of spin it around. You can play around with where you want the petals to lie. If you want one right in the center of your head or you want something a little bit off-centered, and just line up those side seams with where you want the hat to lie. Now we're going to open up the petals, and the petals that are going to be the top of the hat, we're going to pin the right side of that fabric to the right side of the fabric from our crown of our hat, and pin all the way around. You can turn the petals inside out as you go if you'd like, which is what I'm doing here. And now if you flip all of that pinned material out, you'll see this is what our hat's going to look like once we've stitched those lines together. Okay, and now it's time to sew along that line. Make sure that that bottom brim of the hat layer is not getting stitched in place and is not pinned in place. And whilst I'm doing this, can we just talk about bucket hats for a second? I get a sense from the internet and from places like TikTok that bucket hats are like a Gen Z fashion trend, but I feel like in New Zealand, bucket hats never went away. I was wearing bucket hats when I was a toddler, and I've been wearing them ever since. There was never a point in my life where it felt like bucket hats were not fashionable. Am I right in perceiving that bucket hats went through a phase of not being something people wore in other parts of the world? I don't know, discuss below. I feel like they're a New Zealand, Australia staple.
All right, so now the only thing left to stitch for our main part of the hat is this side seam that we have left loose. You're going to be able to line those two pieces of fabric up and see exactly where they need to end, and you can pin them in place, and then we're going to sew from this bottom seam all the way up to the top in a nice straight line to finish off the construction of our hat. And you'll see I've actually done this wrong here. I've done this in a weird curved line. I was trying to hold my camera in place whilst sewing and ended up doing it in a weird way. So I've just gone over it again to straighten up that line, because we want this to be nice and straight so that it's symmetrical with the other side of the hat. And there you have it, that's the top of the hat. And now is the time when I would recommend you take a break. It's gonna get a little bit complicated from here on out, and I know what you're thinking, I'm nearly finished. It'll only take me 5 more minutes, but it won't. It never takes just 5 more minutes. So go, have a cup of coffee, have a snack, go for a walk, go on your phone for a bit, and then come back fresh-faced to finish off assembling the rest of your hat. Alright, hope you had a restful break. Welcome back. So now we're going to stitch together our sweatband, which is made from these two pieces. We're going to pin the edges together and sew along those edges. Okay, and now we're going to take our circular sweatband and we're going to fold it in half all the way around, and then 1 centimeter into the top of that fold we're going to stitch. And I like to use a longer stitch for this part. You'll see this is what it's going to wind up looking like. My camera died in the middle of doing this, so I haven't got the process part filmed. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pin together our main hat, our lining, and that sweatband all together. So we're going to want to have the hat on the inside, and then our lining, and then our sweatband going around it. And you'll see here that the top half of the sweatband has been folded up out of the way. It's just that bottom underneath piece that we've pinned all the way around the hat. Now for our final step, we're going to take that last loose piece and we're going to fold it under itself 1 centimeter, and then we're going to pin it to that last bottom flap of our brim. And as you're going around doing this, make sure that you're folding your sweatband piece a full seam allowance in, and that you're pinning it a full seam allowance in. If you pin it too close to the edge, you might end up missing parts of the brim of your hat, which is going to fray. The other thing that might happen if you don't sew along the recommended seam allowance is that your hat's actually going to feel tighter on your head than it should. Alright, and this is what it should look like when it's all pinned into place. So we're going to stitch along that line, and then we're going to fold that sweatband in under the hat once we're done, and that's going to sit nice and snugly on our head.
And there you have it. Congratulations, you have finished your flower bucket hat. You can wear it to the beach, you can wear it to a music festival, you can wear it to go pick some berries in an orchard, or you can just wear it around the house because life is boring, and injecting a little bit of fun and silliness into your outfit will just make your day so much better. But please, 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 if you make one of these, my Instagram is linked below. Send me pictures, I desperately want to see them. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you watched this all the way through and have decided, I really want one of these, but I absolutely do not have the skill set or cannot be bothered to make one, I am selling some of them on my website. And I think it's time to wrap this up. So thank you so much for watching. Happy sewing.